some science questions to help you better able to tackle them. We will be going through some questions on forms of energy. So we have learned many different kinds of forms of energy such as kinetic, potential, and sound and heat. Now we will see how we can apply our knowledge to the questions. Now let's take a look at an MCQ question on forms of energy. The diagram below shows a ball and an arrow. Which of the following correctly shows the energy conversion when the string is put and then released? Okay. The key concept that is tested here is energy conversion. And before we look at the correct answer, let's highlight some keywords. So they're looking from when the string is put till it is released. So I have a rubber band in my hand, which is something similar to the string and the arrow. Okay, so when I pull it and when I release it, this is what they are looking for. Okay, so let's take a look. This is how the bow and arrow will look like. So if you have tried archery before, you have seen this before. Okay, so there are three parts to this. So when you pull the string will move, and that's why it's kinetic energy. When the string is being stretched, it has elastic potential energy. So when you release it, the string will then bounce back to its original position. Okay, and that will be kinetic energy. Okay, so with that, you will know that the answer is 4. Kinetic energy first, followed by the elastic potential energy and kinetic energy at the last. Now let's take a look at an open-ended question on the forms of energy. The diagram shows 3 identical balls, P, Q, and R, at the starting positions on 3 different ramps with identical surfaces just before they were released. So you see these 3 balls on 3 different ramps. Now let's take a look at the question. The graph shows how energy changed when the ball P traveled from the starting position to X. E and F represent different forms of energy. So we see the ball at the top of a ramp, or we can call it a hill as well, and it drops down and comes up again. So this reminds us that the concept tested here is gravitational potential energy as well as kinetic energy. Okay, now let's highlight some keywords in the question. The question asked about ball P, which is the very first diagram out of the 3 diagrams. Okay, so we only need to take a look at the first one. Okay, and they asked when it is traveling from the starting position to X, not to Y, it's only to X. Okay, so we see that at the starting position X, it is right at the top of what we call it a hill. Okay, it is at a high position. Okay, so at a high position, it should have high gravitational potential energy. Okay, and it will have the lowest kinetic energy. And as it goes down, okay, at X, the gravitational potential energy would have been converted to kinetic energy. And therefore, there will be higher kinetic energy and lower potential energy at the end. Okay, so once we see this, okay, you can see that the graph E is increasing. So it should be the kinetic energy which is increasing, and graph F is decreasing. So it should be the potential energy that is decreasing. Okay, so that is all for part A. Continuing from the previous part, okay, so there are 3 identical balls on 3 different ramps, and part B of the question asked, only one ball traveled to point Y. Which ball, P, Q, or R, reached point Y? Explain your answer. Okay, similarly, this is testing us on gravitational potential energy and kinetic energy. And we need to know which ball actually has enough energy such that it can go past the second hill. Okay, now let's take a look at the question. We need to highlight the keyword, which is only one ball out of 3 balls traveled to point Y, and point Y is at the end of the second hill. Okay, so we look at P. The ball P will go down to X, and maybe it will go slightly up, but it does not have enough energy and it will go back down. Okay, because not enough potential energy is being converted to kinetic energy for it to go to the second hill. Okay, now let's take a look at the next one. Okay, let's take a look at Q. Q will also go down to the bottom of the hill and then it will start to come up again. But because Q is at a very high position, it has a lot of gravitational potential energy, which will then convert to a lot of kinetic energy, and a lot of kinetic energy will allow it to go past the second hill. Okay, so Q is likely to be the answer, but let's check R first. Okay, R is even lower than P. So if P is likely to fall back, R will also fall back. Okay, so our answer will be Q. So we need to answer with the ABC method. So we first answer with a choice, which is ball Q. Then we need to back up our answer with evidence from the question. Okay, so we see that ball Q is at the highest position and therefore it will have the most gravitational potential energy. And lastly, we need to confirm our concept. So the gravitational potential energy of Q will be converted to the most kinetic energy, which is converted to the most gravitational potential energy for it to go over the second hill and reach point Y. So this is the end for part B. Let's carry on with our open-ended question. The diagram below shows 3 identical balls placed at 3 different ramps. Okay, so in part C, it says that a substance W was coated on the ram with the ball identified in part B. Explain in terms of energy why the ball was not able to go over the second hill after substance W was coated on the ram. So this question is testing us on the key concept of energy and friction. So now let's highlight some of the keywords. Substance W was coated on the ram with the ball identified in part B. And this ball we have identified as ball Q. So we only need to take a look at the middle diagram. Explain in terms of energy why the ball was not able to go over the second hill. So in part B, we know that ball Q was able to go over the second hill and reach point Y. But in this question, it was not able to do so because of substance W. Okay, so this is because substance W has caused the surface to be rougher. So what will happen is that the ball Q will go down and it might move slightly up on the hill, but it will eventually fall back down. So now let's take a look at an example. Look at the smooth surface. You will see that the cylinder has moved much further. This is because there is less friction and hence less kinetic energy will be converted to heat energy. The object will then move further away. But if you look at the rough surface, you'll see that the cylinder did not move very far away. This is because when there is more friction, there will be more kinetic energy that is converted to heat energy, and hence the object won't move a very long distance. Now we understand that it is caused by friction. We just need to phrase it in our ABC format. And now let's take a look at how we can phrase our answer. Okay, so now we understand that it is friction that caused the ball Q to not be able to go over the second hill. We just need to phrase our answers. So now we need to use the ABC concept, but only the B and C part. So we need to back with the evidence to tell us that substance W has caused the surface of the ramp to be rougher, and therefore there is more friction between the ball and the ground. Remember, we talk about friction, we always talk about between two different surfaces. Now we confirm the concept. So more kinetic energy of the moving ball was converted to heat energy. Therefore, less kinetic energy of the moving ball was converted to less gravitational potential energy, such that the ball would not be able to reach the second hill and will not be able to reach point Y as well. So this is the end for our open-ended question. We are at the end of forms of energy. So now let's recall some of the keywords we have went through. Energy conversion is very important because energy is always converted from one form to another. So you will need to know in this process what energy is converted to what. We have learned different forms of energy. For example, elastic potential energy. So this is when a string or a spring is being stretched. We have also learned about gravitational potential energy, is when something is being raised above the ground level. We also learned about kinetic. So kinetic energy is when something is moving. In our question, we also see friction. So when there is friction, some of the kinetic energy will then be converted into heat energy. So these are some keywords that we have used in the questions we have went through. Hope this video has been helpful to you so far. Thank you.